So I just want to look a little bit deeper in more detail, specifically about physical and psychological suffering. Now, one thing about physical and psychological suffering is, let's just look at it very practically. Different bodies and different minds and different brains can only take a certain level of sensory stimulation before the brain and the mind naturally begins to become disturbed. So, the monkey who's swinging from tree to tree in the forest, he's receiving just the right amount of sensory stimulation. But suppose we take him, we throw him into a disco. We have a serial killer on our hands. So, and this is a well-known fact. Even the difference between men and women, of course, with certain exceptions. I'm not speaking with any prejudice here. But this is a well-known fact that women, the very way that the mind of the woman functions, she is a much better multitasker than the man. The male mind is more of a one-track mind. Even the way that they perceive things visually, generally speaking, the woman has the way her attention is distributed, she has more peripheral vision, more of a wider range of vision when she's looking at things. But for the man, he has more one-pointed tunnel vision, hunter instinct. So if you were to ask a male to do many of the type of activities which women are doing, he would not be able to know how to juggle all these things at a time. Now usually, when a cheetah will see a lion in the distance, he will run immediately in any direction. The moment he sees a lion, he knows very well, you're not to mess with this guy. Certain differences with the way that the lion goes about his hunting techniques and the way of the cheetah. The advantage of the lion is that the lion has enormous strength. He cannot run very fast. He gets exhausted very easily and very quickly. But one advantage that he has over many of the other animals is that he has enormous strength. So he will just hide, be very quiet as possible. Such sharp, one-pointed concentration, almost the concentration of a yogi, just on the edge. I say almost the concentration of a yogi because his form of concentration is much more of an instinctive form of concentration. It's coming from his instincts. The yogi, that's not the form of concentration of a yogi. The form of concentration of a yogi is with a flame of consciousness, a flame of awareness. It's not just simply coming from the level of his instincts. So he will sit very quietly, observe with very close detail, and just at the right moment, he will attack. Now the hunting technique of the cheetah is very different. His advantage in the natural world is speed. He can travel at such enormous speeds. Within about, let's say, 3.33 seconds, he can run about 100 meters or about 120 kilometers per hour. So I was watching this documentary. Strange, because the cheetahs had seen the lion, 3 cheetahs. They were just fighting and quarreling with each other. The 3 cheetahs had saw the lion in the distance, and they just simply ignored the lion and continued fighting and quarreling. Very unusual behavior for a cheetah in the natural world, who will just panic and run in fear immediately. So the biologists who were studying the cheetahs, they were very curious, what's going on here? And still the lion will get closer and closer and closer. The cheetahs will just notice the lion just momentarily and then continue with their business. And eventually the lion killed and destroyed all 3 cheetahs. So the biologists became very curious what was going on here. So they studied a little bit deeper into it, and they came to the conclusion that these three cheetahs, two of them were male brothers who were fighting over the female, and they were so blinded and drunk and intoxicated with lust that even something so basic as basic survival they were just completely oblivious to. So this is something we need to understand about the brain and the mind. Of course, different brains and minds have different capabilities. Nature likes some diversity. But there's only a certain level of sensory stimulation which certain minds and brains can receive before the mind and the brain begins to become disturbed. So what happens when you're receiving too much sensory stimulation? Of course, assuming you're not meditative. If you're meditative, then you can be in almost any time and at any place, and still you remain somewhat grounded and established within yourself. But assuming you're not meditative, then what happens when you're receiving too much sensory stimulation? The brain and the mind simply becomes overloaded. And this translates into all kinds of psychological disorders, all kinds of physiological disorders in the body. So this is why, in yoga at least, we've always emphasized bringing the human system to a certain level of preparedness, so that when big time energy happens in your experience, you're prepared enough to handle such energy. I don't know if somebody have ever heard of something called Kundalini. Anybody heard the word Kundalini? One? Heard the word Kundalini? In yoga, we've always known that there's a certain kind of energy in the physical body which can be unleashed, which is of enormous intensity. This, to talk about it very briefly, this Kundalini energy exists at the base of the spine. Once this energy is awakened from the base of the spine, it starts gradually ascending up the spinal cord. And the more this energy ascends up the spinal cord, your consciousness and your perception will move into various different states of perception. So we've said in yoga, there's about 6 energy centers located within the very spine itself, which are called the chakras. Probably some of you may have heard about the chakras. In yoga, the spine has always been referred to as Merudanda, the axis of the world, because we've always been saying that if you know how to access the spine and bring about various transformations to the spinal cord, then it's also possible to bring various different transformations of consciousness. And every realm of what a human being is can be thoroughly explored just by learning how to access these centers of energy along the spine. To put it very simply, the 3 lower chakras, which is from the navel to the sacral plexus to the base of the spine, these are mostly responsible for instinct. The 3 higher centers, the heart center to the throat, to what we're calling the third eye, these are responsible for expanding your perception beyond instinct. So why I'm mentioning this just as an example is because this Kundalini is of such tremendous intensity that if you awaken this energy and the physical system is not prepared to receive it, then it would be a bit like, let's say you have a machine, okay, which can take only 50 watts. Now imagine you're pumping it with 1000 watts. What is going to happen? It's going to create a short circuit in the whole system. So for this reason, whether you're practicing yoga or you're not practicing yoga, the amount of energy and sensory stimulation which the human system can take is only according to a certain limit. If you cross the edge, cross the boundary of that limit, now all sorts of physical and psychological disorders start happening.